Hello, my name is Morgan Keohane, and I have been a school librarian working for Boston Public Schools since 2013. And today I want to share my thoughts on the importance of developing student agency through meaningful library partnership. So in this presentation, I'm hoping to focus on how to create meaningful partnerships that are able to teach both students and families foundational literacy skills, as well as highlighting how to establish the library as a collaborative, inclusive environment so that students are able to establish agency and find comfort developing their own personal interests. And before I start, I always want to acknowledge that I have received consent from both students and their families for all photos and videos used in this presentation. This ties into that agency piece and allowing students control over what is shared. And they always like to know that they're being talked about and that people from across the country get to see their shining faces. So let's get started. I want to begin by telling you a little bit about my particular school where I work. I work in a neighborhood of Boston known as Dorchester, and this area is not only identified by its level of economic and racial diversity, but also a history of a large immigrant population. And my school currently serves students in grades K0, which is what Boston calls pre-kindergarten, through 5th grade. And here you can see some of our student demographic data, and you'll notice that the majority of my students are identified as high needs and that many of them do not speak English as their first language. A lot of my students speak either Spanish or Haitian Creole at home. And when I started back in 2013, I was given an empty room with no books, no shelves, no budget, and was told, turn this into a library. So I literally had to build my school's library program from the ground up, and I tried to establish a library space that would hopefully play a key role in the cultural and social life of the school. And honestly, the only way that I was able to do this was through partnership. I developed a partnership with the local library to provide my students with access to titles. I reached out to every local organization, business, museum that I thought might align with our school's mission and values to see how I could partner with them, whether that be receiving resources, mentors, guest visitors, free field trips, you name it. So some questions you might want to ask yourself when looking for meaningful partnerships are: does this potential partnership align with your library program goals, values, or budget? So from the beginning, I had to be very transparent that I did not have a library budget, but that I was willing to fundraise or provide other services in exchange. For example, I was willing to pilot curriculums, give lesson feedback, give input on field trip experiences, write testimonials, etc. So another question is, do you have support? And if not, are you willing to take on the load yourself? And sometimes that support could just mean you're going to have an opportunity to collaborate with classroom teachers, or you're going to have support from families and that they want to work with you on a more personal level. Also, what are your students' interests? What can be done to support those interests or needs if they aren't necessarily being met in the classroom? So this is where partnership can really come into play, as well as that agency piece. It seems so simple, but start by meeting with students and asking them, what do they like? What do they dislike? What do they feel is missing from their school experience? And when I started asking those questions in an elementary school, I got many answers like, we need a water slide, or we need unlimited candy in the library. But I also got really great insight into the fact that my students expressed they wanted more hands-on activities, particularly STEM-related activities. And this was a gap that I knew I could try to help fill in the library space. I'm not pushing my students to enter a STEM-related field, but I want to at least provide them with exposure so they can then decide for themselves whether or not it's an area of interest for them. So again, partnering so that my students can then get that agency piece to say, yes, this is something I want to pursue and learn about, or no, it's not. I've actually found out I'm all set with this and I'd like to try something else. So once you have asked yourself these questions, then you can begin to identify potential partnerships. And these are just some of the partnerships that I currently work with in the library. And then just to note, when I was reaching out to develop these partnerships, I was very transparent in sharing the interests that my students had and what gaps I thought needed to be filled in our school's current offerings. So on top of wanting STEM-related experiences, my school needed opportunities for students to engage with people that looked like them and opportunities for families to become active learning participants. So I'm just going to talk about how meaningful some of these partnerships have been in creating my own library program and teaching foundational literacy skills and helping students to recognize the library as an inclusive place, a place where they feel comfortable exploring their personal interests without fear or judgment. So for this partnership, in my first few years working at the school, I noticed that many families expressed to me their hesitation about reading at home because they had either never learned to read themselves, they were afraid that they weren't able to read every single word on the page in a book, so almost like a fear or embarrassment around reading with their child, or they simply didn't have any books of their own to practice reading at home. So this is where I found a program that aligned with my school's mission and what we were trying to go for. And Raising a Reader helps families practice and learn research-based strategies to develop habits of reading books as a family at home. So every week you can see some of my youngest students right there. They get to take home a bag of books. The books are in multiple languages. Many of them are award-winning, have a diverse range of characters, and they get to practice the habit of sharing books together at home. And this program really gave my youngest students a lot of agency in that they took ownership over these bags, learning responsibility, proper book care and handling. And then it helped families connect with the library as well. So really getting in the habit of sharing and discussing books, not just with their students, but with me as well. And then this picture, actually, at the end, you can see that little boy with his mom. When our school changed to online learning during COVID, it really became difficult to keep the bag rotation going, but the partnership was important. So I was able to secure donated iPads that I then pre-downloaded with literacy apps for the families so that they could keep them and use them at home. I also want to acknowledge that anything I send home gets sent home in multiple languages. And that anything I'm trying to do, for example, you can see these 2 event flyers in English and in Spanish, is meant to help families realize that even if they themselves are not yet comfortable with reading out loud, literacy can start as just a simple conversation with their child. So in a lot of these partnerships with families, I'm teaching them that it's okay if you don't know every single word on the page. That is totally fine. If you're having a conversation with your child about the story, asking questions, that's great. That's a very meaningful activity. You can also see just an example of a monthly calendar that I send home with very simple ideas of how to incorporate literacy habits at home. So it might be picking a letter that day and pointing out things that start with that letter with their child. Again, looking at the pictures, asking questions about what's happening in the story, that's fine. No one has to be a perfect reader. And by showing parents how to engage in these types of strategies and these interactive reading routines, regardless of their own reading abilities, parents really started to tell me they felt empowered at home. My students love showing each other what books they got to read that week. They love that many of the books were in their home language and they had more of a sense of pride sharing these stories with one another. And yeah, it's been really great. The data actually has shown for our school, for these youngest students, that huge improvements in listening comprehension, picture vocabulary skills, print and book awareness. It's all gone up. Just another helpful fact, 78% of Shaw families who were not reading 3 times a week at the beginning of the school year reported that they were reading 3 times a week at the end. That's a huge improvement. And you can see this is actually families coming into the library. Students alongside their families had selected books that they were interested in reading together, and I was able to secure a partnership that successfully funded purchasing all those books and getting them into the hands of the families and students for them to keep and build their own home libraries, which is great. I do want to acknowledge that not just this Raising a Reader partnership, but all of the partnerships have definitely grown over time. It wasn't something that just was incredible right away. But once partners realized my level of commitment and willingness to engage in the work, word started to spread and more opportunities started coming my way in terms of what I was able to implement in the school library. So this is my partnering with another organization. It's called Storytime Crafts, and we were able to help set up home libraries and build on existing classroom library collections. So throughout this process, I was able to partner with students and their families and classroom teachers to specifically ask what kind of books they wanted. Here's another incredible partnership, Wondermore, that brings in award-winning authors and illustrators into our school for students to meet. This is Oge Mora, who has come to our school a few times. And one of the needs, as I had said earlier, that our school was desperately searching for, was being able to find meaningful opportunities for my students to engage with people that looked like them. So here's Oge Mora. She's an amazing writer and illustrator, talking to students about her stories, and she even shared her love of librarians, which was incredible. So even just that need, a lot of the partnerships, I'm making sure that the people that are coming into our building are representative of our student population. Here's another example, Trisha Ellen Walker coming to our school, and also just my partnership with the art teacher at our school. So after the visit where she was able to share her story, Dream Street, the students really expressed they wanted to know how the artwork had been completed and how they could copy similar style of illustrations. So in collaboration and partnership with the art teacher and the push from the students that this is what they wanted, they learned how to use collage materials to make their own similar illustrations to that of the story. Again, here's just some pictures of some partnerships that have come to our school, Boston Latin School students reading, and you can see some volunteers from Vertex coming in to share with our students. Any opportunity, again, as I said, for students to connect with someone other than myself is really incredible. And just being able to share stories and highlight, successes is awesome. Here's again Vertex. Students asked, they wanted hands-on STEM-related experiences. Here they are learning about cystic fibrosis, which is something that Vertex works very closely on. They were testing different mucus samples and what that feels like for someone that does have cystic fibrosis. They did strawberry DNA experiments, used 3D pens, all of this through partnership. And I think their faces say it all. So how do these partnerships create that culture of agency? Really, first letting students know we care, that we're thinking about their needs and what they're asking for, and then giving them that space to do it, to express themselves, develop those interests, and continue to vocalize what it is they want. I'm just sharing our school pledge because you can notice at the bottom, this is something that we say every day, and it was specifically created by Shaw students and families. They wrote it. This is what they want to focus on. So in the library, I want my students to develop not just a love for reading, but a commitment to lifelong learning. And for many of my students, this means finding alternative methods to demonstrate confidence in their reading abilities. So, for example, for my nonverbal students, how are they able to share and express their thoughts during a story time? That's something that my students, my verbal students actually had said, we want to make sure that they feel included, that they're able to participate in our library discussions. So they coded programs that when my nonverbal students touched parts of the story, it would actually say a voice so that they could share and help in the telling of the stories, which is incredible. The students thought of it, designed it, made it, and made sure that this was something that we use fairly regularly in the library. Again, you can see on the iPad, one of my students is coding a program for a nonverbal student so that they're able to share and ask questions in the library. You can also see tying in that STEM piece, which is what students pushed for and wanted. We were doing a retelling of the snowy day, but that student is actually drawing out a map. I don't know if you can see that yellow bee robot behind him, and he's actually going to code the robot so that it goes in the sequence of the story. And that's how he's going to share that he got it. He knows order of events. Another big push, because many of my students do not speak English as their first language, they had specifically asked for translators during special library events and even read-alouds. So that's something that I've had to push for and partner with, whether that be I'm asking families to come in their free time and help translate, or just making sure that we have that through BPS. We have translators during these events, so all students and families feel included in sharing, learning, reading. That's something that we've really pushed for, and it's definitely a work in progress, but something that's been incredibly meaningful, especially because the students asked. So I truly believe these partnerships lead to student agency. I mentioned them wanting STEM activities. This is them learning how to use 3D pens. They were creating structures after reading this story about how a beak was 3D engineered for a bald eagle that has lost his beak. Something that they had been inspired by from the story and then asked, how can we create something like that? These are just, again, when I said, what can I give in return to the partnership? What is our relationship? Simply just thank yous, students expressing their learning and their appreciative of it happen to be huge. Okay, that agency piece. After learning how much we do in our school library, and then my students finding out that not every school around them had a library, there was a huge push for them to learn more about why and create a campaign for social activism around the importance of libraries in schools. Here they are putting on a play about Frederick Douglass and the right to read, and you can see their dioramas. They're actually showing different protests around the city that have been related to making sure not just school libraries, but our public library branches stay open as well. All created by them, all driven by them. Again, driven by them, creating, painting, designing little free libraries, getting them sponsored so that not only do we have a little free library, but diverse authors and illustrators, those types of books are going into those little free libraries in our neighborhood. All pushed for and done by the students. So really that agency piece of what they want, what they feel in control of coming from the library. So I hope this presentation left you with some ideas about how to develop student agency through partnership. Please don't hesitate to reach out with any thoughts or questions. I know it's a lot and trying to jam it all in. So thank you for taking the time to watch this. And again, please don't hesitate.